In my experience as a pastor over these many years, one of the things that I have found out is when people have a question to God, it usually begins with the word why. Why did this happen? Why didn't you answer this prayer? Why am I going through this? Why? I want to read something to you from Job, the 42nd chapter. And then I'm going to tell you a very horrible story. Not as horrible as Job's story, but this one's pretty horrible. Job 42, 1-6, Job replied to the Lord, I know that you can do all things. No plan of yours can be thwarted. You asked, who is this that obscures my counsel without knowledge? Surely I spoke of things I did not understand, things too wonderful for me to know. You said, listen now and I will speak. I will question you and you shall answer me. My ears had heard of you, but now my eyes have seen you. Therefore, I despise myself and repent in dust and ashes. Now, if you're familiar with the story of Job, it's pretty horrible. He lost his family, his livestock, went through personal physical suffering. God restored all that, but let me tell you an updated horrible story. A woman by the name of Vinitha Rendall, who came down with polio long after, supposedly, it had been eradicated. The doctors misdiagnosed her symptoms because they'd never seen polio before. The wrong diagnosis led to widespread paralysis, and most of her childhood was spent in hospitals and having very painful surgeries. Through a miracle of God, she later married and actually had a baby. It was over 30 years later. But her infant son died because a substitute doctor was unfamiliar with his heart condition, and the doctor took him off of his life-saving medicine. And within 2 days, her baby boy died. How do you reconcile losses like this? We would call them unspeakable. We would call them horrible. In the case of in both cases, they were preventable. They were unexpected. And it's natural to ask why. Why did this happen? Why would God allow this to happen? Stand back and not miraculously intervene. If he's in control, why did he let it happen? Why didn't he stop it? There's a lot of whys involved in that story. And I think that is a question that all of us have sometimes. Why? Why is this happening? Why is this happening to me? And we tell ourselves, if I just had an explanation, if I just knew why, if I just could know that God had some purpose in it, if there was just a reason, I'd be able to accept it and move on. But many times our why is never answered. It seems like it's the key to unlock all of our pain. It'll give us clarity. It'll give us peace. It'll give us freedom. Not knowing why, and having to trust God in what we view as a senseless situation. We feel like the world's exploding around us or collapsing in on us. We've got to pick up the pieces of our life. It seems impossible. How can I do this? Give me something, at least tell me why. And what God is asking is the unthinkable. He's asking us to trust him in the dark. He's asking us to trust him when we don't understand. He's asking us to accept the fact that he is sovereign. He's asking us to believe that he has a purpose when what we're going through doesn't make any sense at all. Simply put, he's asking me to do what might seem unthinkable, and that is to trust him. But we want to understand. We want to see. We want to be able to agree with God when he tells us the reason we're going through this. Okay, God, now that you've told me why, I understand and I agree. But accepting all this takes faith. And I possess faith in great measure when I'm not going through a trial. Right? It's easy to have faith when you're rolling along through life, and to use a biblical example, when you're not in the furnace. But when the flames envelop me, my faith wavers as I watch my dreams fall apart. Now, though not as serious as what Vinitha went through by any stretch or imagination, I have to tell you that many years ago, I went through a horrible situation when the retina in my eye became detached twice within 6 weeks. And I was very scared. I remember Hattie and Pete and Tim in particular stepped up and handled things here at the church. But as I was, first of all, trying to figure out what was going, and if you've never had a detached retina, here's what happens. Your vision starts to go like this. It's just like a curtain coming down. And, you know, at first I thought, oh, maybe I'm getting pink eye. Maybe I got something in my eye, so I'm rinsing my eye. I'm rinsing it. And I'm just slowly losing my vision. Well, I found out what it was. I also found out that there was a treatment for it. And if you're squeamish, plug your ears. What they do is they'll take a needle after numbing your eye, and they stick the needle in your eye, and they put an air bubble in there, and then you have to keep your face down so the air bubble stays in the back of your eye and holds the retina in place. And I remember watching Steeler football. This was not going to keep me from watching Steelers. Sitting in a dining room chair with the TV on the floor facing up so that I could keep the bubble. Okay? But all kinds of things go through your mind. It's like, God, why is this happening to me? Am I going to lose my sight? Is this going to happen in my other eye? Because here's another thing I found out. If you have cataract surgery, which I did at 49 years old, Dr. Fichte told me, youngest cataract patient he's ever had, they use a pulse wave of sound. And if you're nearsighted, which I was born nearsighted, it shakes your retina, shakes your retina. So having the cataract surgery and being nearsighted shook my retina and it became detached, okay? So first time, and then 6 weeks later, the second time. And what if the bubble in the back of my eye doesn't heal the retina? What if it happens in my other eye? What if I go blind? How am I going to do my job if I go blind? So there were a lot of questions that made me more agitated and made me question in 100 ways, why this, why now, why me? But I want to tell you the good ending to this story. Without glasses now, I have better than 20/20 vision. Isn't that cool? And I thank Dr. Lee. He told me he welded, after the second time, he said, I'm gonna weld your retina to the back of your eye, so your eye's gonna have to fall out before your retina becomes detached again. But the thing is, my eventual relinquishing the desire to know why this happened is what finally set me free. I thought the freedom would be found in finding out the answers, which I found out part of the answers of why this happened. Okay, I told you that. But what really freed me was when I finally said to God, if you want me blind, I'll take it. I gave it up. I had to remind myself things I've been preaching about for a long time. God is wiser than me. He has a purpose for everything he does or allows to happen. I love him. I'm called according to his purpose. It'll work out. He had a reason. He might have had 1,000 reasons. He might have had 10,000 reasons, and I might not even know ever for sure why. I came across this quote by John Piper, though, that I think fits this situation, beneath the situation, and maybe your situation. John Piper says this: God is always doing 10,000 things in your life, and you might be aware of 3 of them. We might see a few things God is doing, 1 or 2 ways he's using our pain. But while we're on earth, we'll never see the full picture for what we've been going through. And I think if we could see what God sees, we'd be overwhelmed. We'd be stunned. There's a lot more taking place in the heavenly realms than what we could ever imagine. If you read the book of Job, and I'm sure many of you have, it gives us a glimpse into that unseen world. We're kind of like taken backstage into the throne room of God, where we get a little inside information to what Job can't understand about his tragedy. Now remember what his initial response was? Acceptance and worship. But as the days wore on, and the weeks wore on, and his friends started to taunt him, Job gave in, and he started arguing with God, lamenting his situation, asking why his life had been torn apart in spite of the fact that he was faithful to God. And then he had a personal encounter. And he's back to acceptance and worship. He no longer needed to know. As I read here, it says he repented in dust and ashes. He learned that God had a purpose, that all of God's actions are intentional. How far the ocean would go, commanding the morning, everything God did was perfectly orchestrated. Nothing was random. Nothing escaped his attention. I know you can do all things, and that no purpose of yours can be thwarted, the 2nd verse. But Job, at this time, didn't really know what the purpose was. God never gave Job any explanation for his suffering. The Lord just demonstrated his absolute wisdom and power, and that was enough for Job. Ron Deal wrote this: God doesn't defend himself, he just defines himself. Suffering had invited Job to see God in a way he never had before. Job learned he could trust God with the things in this life he would never have the privilege of understanding. And it hasn't changed. It's the same way with us. We trust God with the things in life we might never understand. We might never know why we go through certain trials. We can always take comfort in the fact that there's always a reason for our suffering. In fact, 10,000 reasons maybe. Reasons that are bigger than anything we could imagine. The Bible promises that one day our faith will be sight. We'll see God's purposes in our trials. But for now, he says, trust me. We might never understand why. But when we surrender to him, he'll answer with himself. Now, you might have come in this morning with a why question. You got a why question for God. God, why? Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to answer that. But I can say this. Trust him. Surrender those questions to him. He does have a purpose. His actions are intentional, or his inaction is intentional. Your situation has not escaped his notice. There is a reason, or 10,000. You may or may not ever know it. But his purposes cannot be thwarted. Let's pray. I think of an old hymn, Lord, trust and obey, for there's no other way to be happy in Jesus but to trust and obey. I know I'm not the only person in this room this morning who trusts you. But there may be some waffling, not sure. Somehow get through to them today that you are worthy of our trust.